Hello, Trek Guardians, and welcome back to another Trekyards episode. I am your captain, but you can call me Captain Foley.
And I'm Commander Cockings. Welcome back, guys. Great to see you all of you again for another amazing week.
Indeed. Today's episode is about a ship that, if I'm honest, I'm not really a big fan of, for multiple reasons. But that being said, it is an interesting ship. Again, for multiple reasons. Now, I know this is one of your favorite ships, Commander. So would you like to tell all our viewers which ship we'll be looking at here today?
Sure thing, Cap. We are taking a look at the Klingon bird of prey from Enterprise, the proto bird of prey, the retro bird of prey, or just the Enterprise bird of prey, designed by the incredible one and only Mr. John Eaves.
Yeah, or as I call it, the retro bird of prey. It's just that's kind of my name for it.
So this ship was one of the most essential ships in the Klingon Defence Force and was primarily used for patrol duties, as well as the occasional assault and raiding runs, even raiding in as far as Earth's solar system, which we saw in 2150s.
As with many ships in Trek, there is some confusion about the size of this vessel, and we were lucky enough to have been given the original 3D model of the ship that was used in the show, and as such can work with the canon ship to work out details such as sizing.
The ship's length, as stated in the up-to-date Eagle Moss magazine, says it's 145 metres, with the NX-01, remember, being 225 metres. To give it some context, the original Borel, I have that too, Scout version of the bird of prey, which seen in later Trek, is 109 metres. But remember, that is, just as I said, the Scout version, and we can see this bird of prey is easily matched with the NX-01, so I would say clearly more than just a Scout version.
On Enterprise, the 3D modelers built the CGI ship so that each ship would be in scale to each other. This allowed for each model to be brought into a scene and worked with, safe in the knowledge that everything was correct and in canon.
When we do this for the NX-01 and this bird of prey, she's in fact, so if you work it all out, 185 metres, not 145, to the NX-01's 225. I would tend to agree with this larger size, given there's actually a shot in Season 4 where we see the two ships docked, and I don't think she looks 145 metres, I think she looks like a bigger ship. So I think 185 metres is a pretty good size, although still, if you think about it, relatively small for the amount of punch that ship has. So I will go with the CGI model scale and say that it's 125 metres.
And I will gladly agree with you on that. Okay. Officially, however, much like the first bird of prey we see in Star Trek III, The Search for Spock, this ship is classed as a Scout-class vessel with a crew of about 18. If you were to believe revisionist history and propaganda, if you will, small-winged craft referred to as birds of prey have been around since the first days of the Klingon Empire, first achieving spaceflight. This same unique layout improved and adapted over the years to become much more powerful and versatile. But the main premise has always remained the same. The standard configuration consists of an engineering hull connected to two large wings, as well as a boom extending to the forward part of the ship, which housed the bridge.
Very similar to the D7, another Klingon design. Starfleet, or I guess humans' first encounter with this bird of prey was in 2153, when Enterprise NX-01 discovered the ship at the outer perimeters of our solar system. Luckily for NX-01, 3 other Starfleet ships came in to the rescue, and the bird of prey was forced to retreat, being slightly outmatched. The commanders of these bird of preys often would operate independently from the Empire, and far from Klingon territory. However, if needed, the commander could call in for other bird of preys to come in and offer assistance if needed. Bird of preys often form parts of larger patrol groups to ensure that they could outmatch any hostile vehicle vessel that they could encounter. These smaller bird of preys also often were support crafts to larger ships, such as the Klingon D5.
The bird of preys were impressively armed and could definitely hold their own in a fight, with 8 disruptor cannons in total. 1 on each wingtip, capable of firing both beam and pulse disruptors, twin cannons on either side of the forward command module, and a larger 360-degree rotating disruptor turret located on the other side of the ship. The 360-degree cannon provided a wide field of fire and was an extremely useful weapon. When entering combat, the first weapons generally fired by a Klingon commander would be the wing cannons, followed by opening up all the other cannons for a devastating attack run.
But that wasn't all of the armaments for this ship. They also had 2 powerful photon torpedo launchers, one fore and one aft, and these are by far its most powerful weapons. Because of their arsenal of weapons, the bird of prey were far more than a match for the NX-01, and even capable of outgunning 2 Orion interceptors, which, in the story, they were said to take out the NX-01, so that's going to be an easy fight. Due to the Klingons' attack strategies, however, which were, as we see a lot of the time, head-on assaults, the front of the ship was far more heavily armoured than the rear. The bridge module was very heavily protected with dispersive armour designed to withstand most direct fire. And as we saw in one of the episodes, power can be diverted to the force fields, the shields around the ship, although they tend to go to the front of the ship, leaving the rear again heavily exposed. Those Klingons.
That's kind of my attack strategy in a lot of games, especially Starfleet battles. I go in, just fire all my guns, take all the damage to my front shield, and then I'm kind of in a bad position. But anyway, this way of thinking did have its drawbacks, however, in the form of weak spots, specifically near the rear of the ship. The bird of prey did have a massive design flaw in that if their enemy achieved a direct hit on the main plasma junction, which was located just above the sensor array and just forward of the primary warp reactor, then the ship's entire power grid would be disabled.
To be fair, though, you did have to know this weakness existed to be able to exploit it. It's not something that just sensors could pick up. So I'm just going to put that out there.
Good point.
Nice.
When it came time to dock with another ship, the bird of prey had two main docking ports, one located on either side of the engineering hull.
The bird of prey also boasted full shielding, photon torpedoes, and tractor beam technology, all of which Starfleet did not have at this time. Located under each wing was a dual tractor emitter. These were used to hold or pull enemy ships into the bird of prey's shuttle bay, which was located on the underside of the craft, at the back. Unlike the Raptor-class starships, the bird of prey were equipped with escape pods and room enough in its shuttle bay for at least one standard shuttle and a Denobular medical transport ship, which I guess is sometimes there. Always see it in episode once.
The main bulk of the ship's overall mass was incorporated into its aft section, which contained the mess hall, kitchen, crew quarters, labs, shuttle bay, and engineering. Much like the Raptor-class ships of the same period, the bird of prey carried live food in its targ pits, which were located near the galley. I wonder if they actually had like a large gawk tank filled with slithering, slimy yumminess. Because even Pumbaa from The Lion King thinks that gawk is slimy yet satisfying.
I'd say any classy captain is going to want to be good to his crew. They're going to want to have a gawk pit, a whole hog. Those two.
I wonder if their engine room looks like a blood wine brewery. Oh, just in the JJ verse, I guess, probably, eh?
I like that. So, wouldn't it be interesting if they distill their alcohol through the warp reactor, and that's how it gets even more boozified.
Radioactive and
yeah, it's all one big.
Yeah,
it's
sure.
half brewery, half starship. I mean, makes sense. So much sense. Anyway, the British design of these bird of prey from this era are barely changed, and they really only changed barely up until the 24th century. Well, it's mostly just sets, but still. The commander was always on a throne-like seat raised up in the centre of the bridge. The roof was made up of grating, and was a combination of both wall-mounted and freestanding consoles. Not all bridges were exactly the same, however. In fact, it would be difficult to find two identical bridges. If you watch our Legends episode on the Bird of Prey, you would see that all these different ships were customised by the commanders when they were purchased by the specific houses, because you don't want an identical ship, even if it's basically the same. Bit of red there, bit of black there, bit of darker red, bit of lighter red. I mean, this was usually done during the initial construction of the ships, but with each new commander came a new personalization.
The warp engines were powered by a matter-antimatter reactor that used dilithium crystals to focus the reaction. The bright red plasma generated by the warp engines could be clearly seen from outside the ship through large vents. The warp field was generated by sending superheated plasma into the wings, where it energizes the Klingon's equivalent of warp coils. Energy from the plasma can then be directly sent and fired from the wingtip disruptors, greatly increasing their effective punch. The ship had a maximum speed of warp 5.3 for 10 hours, and a standard cruising speed of warp 3.8.
Before their alliance with the Romulans, Klingon ships were not fitted with cloaking devices, so it was much harder for them to evade from their enemies.
Nor did they have bird of prey for that matter, but that's another story.
That's later on. Their ships lacked shielding weaponry at the rear, so it was important for them to make frontal assaults and disable their opponents on their first or second volley if possible. They also had severe weaknesses that related to their energy distribution network, as we already said. The new cloaking devices provided by the Romulans, the mission profile for the bird of prey changed drastically, and the extraneous weapons had to be removed so the cloak could get the power it needed at any moment. I wouldn't be surprised if this class of bird of prey could actually outmatch a Burrell class in a fight given its massive weapons. But, Stuart, we have a special guest, so do you want to take us into that section?
Absolutely. And now for the designing portion of the show, let's talk to one of our favorite designers. Everyone, please welcome Mr. John Eaves back to the show. Welcome back, John.
Howdy.
So I got to start this off by saying that I simply love all your work. You have some of the greatest ship designs ever, in my personal opinion. That being said, however, this is not one of them.
Yeah.
I don't really like this ship at all. I'm not a fan of how it looks or how it was kind of shoehorned into Trek history. But we will discuss that in more detail a little bit later. So sorry, John. Don't hit me.
Well, that would have been cool to hear your points on it, so you'll have to tell me.
And I've got to say, I absolutely love this design. I think it's fantastic, fantastically retro bird of prey, and I'm very, very excited to talk to you about her because she's amazing.
There you go. Awesome.
You're such a suck up, Samuel.
It's a love and hate ship. There you go.
All right. So, how did you hear that you would be designing this ship, and how did you feel about designing a new Enterprise era bird of prey? We know you had designed a new bird of prey for Deep Space Nine, which never really got used, and that may have been part of your design process. But let's just start at the beginning. How did you find out, and what did you think of this new design challenge? Was there any guidance as to how this bird of prey should look?
Well, it was always exciting when we'd get the scripts or the beat sheet, because you kind of look. We were averaging somewhere between 2 to 5 new ships a script, and sometimes they'd all make it, sometimes they'd get written out. And you'd always wonder, I hope there's a Klingon in there, or I hope there's a Romulan, or something that you grew up loving and you wanted to work on. And this one particular script came up, and it had Klingon in it, and it had Federation ships. It's like, this is fantastic. And it was basically I think it was a kind of like a story arc that took place over a few scripts where they're coming home. The NX-01 is coming home, and it mentioned that they had a Klingon bird of prey, specifically a Klingon bird of prey in the script. We thought, oh boy. And so we resubmitted a design we did for Deep Space Nine. And he goes, no, we've seen that before. We don't want that one. And so we had to come up with something new. And kind of using the earlier Klingon architecture that we'd worked on with the cabling and all that kind of stuff, we thought, okay, let's take Nilo's original design and take it back into the NX-01 history. And so I drew one drawing. It was a 3/4 view. And I took all my favorite elements of the bird of prey, yet tried to take them back. So the big piping that goes around the bridge console, I put on there, put some torpedo launchers on the side, kind of jacked up the height of the nacelles on the top, kind of thinned out the wings a little bit on the end. I just tried to do little things that would make it look distinctly different, because with the wings down and the wings up, you got the original bird of prey. So that's the other challenge, especially if you're redoing a ship that's so iconic as the original. You want to make it at least stand out differently on camera points of view. And so I turned in the 3/4 drawing of black and white, and they liked the elements, and basically they asked for a color, turned in the color, and then it went right to the CG guys over at Eden. And from there, they took that 3/4 and turned it into all that you see now with the big heavy fans on the side. And I really love the back view they came up with, it almost looks taller than it does wide on a lot of the back shots. And I was really quite happy with how that turned out. Design-wise, I didn't have to really go too far on it. They liked what the first drawing was, which was just very rare on a first drawing, because usually it takes many, many passes. But Klingons are pretty easy in Enterprise world, especially bird of prey, because Rick Berman, that's his favorite ship shape for bad guys. And you'll see that with Nemesis, the scimitar. We drew all kinds of stuff, but at one moment we started putting a bird of prey kind of feel to it, he started responding to it. So that to him is an angry, aggressive shape.
So at this point in Enterprise, we'd already seen the Klingon Raptor, the D5, and the D4 concept, which was unused. So what was your, besides just the cabling, what was your take on how the general design for the Klingons were for that era in terms of bulkiness or sleekness or aggressive feel? What was your overall take on the style? And then what basic elements do you try and, because obviously you've got the basic shape, but what other pieces do you try and mold into this bird of prey to make it very recognizable and not, any other era or any other faction?
Mm-hmm. Well, what was fun about it is on the original bird of prey, I used to work in the model shop with Greg Jean. We worked on the ILM model, and looking at the model as opposed to what you see on screen, there's so much magic on this model, and especially where the wings fold down. There's it's like 2 combs. They fold in like blades on top of each other. And I didn't really notice that, in the movie you don't get a shot of, you see there's, the wing itself has a series of those blades, and the body does, and they just fold in between each other. And it's kind of tight on the original bird of prey, and I thought maybe if I put a little bit of gap between the two, you'll see that manipulation work a little bit better. It still does the same thing, and you don't see it because they're smooth, and there's no, maybe if you put notches on it, you would see that one is stationary while the other one moves. But that was one of the key elements I wanted to put on there. I extended them out a little bit to give it a little bit more structure on the wing. The wingtip guns were always a favorite on that bird of prey. It was like a double barrel with a big cone on the end of it. And so I tried to thin this down just a little bit, because it not only had the 2 wing guns, but it had a belly gun. And we drew those on all the Klingon ships. 2 of them made it, and the rest didn't. But that one was really cool. So it has armament all the way around it, and those features. The belly gun obviously was different from the original Bird of Prey. So that would make it on a front view or a rear view when they're filming it. You'd have something else to kind of distract you from that. Hey, this is something different. Didn't get to do any design work on the back end of it, and that's kind of where a lot of things will tie together when you get that rear view, the front view, and the 3/4 view. You've established what a lot of the areas are going to look like, but looking at something from the back changes all of that. Same with the Enterprise E. From the front, the nacelle struts look very flat, but from the back they have more of a 45-degree angle, and it just depends on how you shoot it. And that wound up being true with the model of this. They don't look that angular from the front drawing view, but from the back they got a very, very steep attack profile to them. And I love what the CG guys did with it, but that would have been an area I would have really liked to spend some time drawing on, and then I could have tied more details into it. And if that didn't work, I could change and add things. But just from that 1 3/4 view, I tried to add as much nostalgia as I could, yet make it different.
So we first saw the now iconic Bird of Prey in 2285. That's the one I really like, the one from Star Trek 3. And this Enterprise era design is from 2153, so 132 years earlier. So it's quite a stretch of time. Now, the wings are a lot smaller on yours. There's just a lot of design cues that are just so much different that makes it go from something I really like to something I don't like. How did you see the evolution of this ship, as far as if you were a ship designer, how should I word this?
Well, you retro designed it, so how, in your mind, why would the Klingons have gone from this design to that design? Being 132 years, it's quite a stretch, but what do you think that step could be?
Well, what's funny about drawing a lot of this stuff is you get the opportunity to, especially when they go, could you do another pass or do some extra versions of it? Then you can flesh all those things out. This was just kind of the original first ideas I had, and I put it on paper, and I never got to carry it any further. Had I had the time, I would have thickened up the wings a bit because I thought they were too narrow at the end. I would have made that wider. I think I would have arched the back more as opposed to keeping it straight. And there's a lot of things I would have reworked on this had I had the opportunity, and it just never came.
Well, those are a few of the things that I don't like about it. So, I mean...
Yeah, coming to the tip, it almost looks too fragile. But in the drawing, it was very, very, very quick. And that's one of the hardest things with a TV timeline is there's not a lot of time. And either they disapprove what you're doing and you have to draw something completely different, which is kind of cool sometimes. Kind of what you think was the best ideas, sometimes not. And it all kind of comes out in the end.
So I think rudimentary is a reasonable word for this ship. All the cables you said, and the rather bulky pieces. It's not a sleek ship by any means, but clearly capable from what we see in Enterprise. What were you told about its relative strength when compared to the previously seen and rather powerful D5 or the NX-01 itself? In Star Trek 3, the Burrell class was only a scout ship. Was this to be a scout ship or something more on par with the D5, more of a battle cruiser? Maybe more maneuverable with the same power. We know from an Enterprise from the season 2 episode it gets introduced in is at least more a match for the NX-01, and later on they have a decent fight of it. But what did you picture being her strength, and were you given any direction on, was she a scout, was she more?
Well, what we have with this earlier story arc stuff, we don't know what's before it, and so in our minds we're kind of thinking this would be the first Bird of Prey. So it might be more clunky in design. It might be more like a Soyuz as opposed to some modern Soviet stuff. So I always would use that kind of Soviet space architecture as a strong basis. And when the Soyuz, I don't think has ever changed really shape-wise. You can go back to the 60s, and it looks like it does now. It still has the ball. It has the capsule. When they had the Apollo and the Soyuz dock, our ships are progressing in their design. They like that Soyuz shape and kept with it. So I was thinking the same thing with the Klingon stuff. They got a shape, they like it, and it starts out a little cruder, and then they clean it up as it goes. So I left that one kind of bulkier on purpose, thinking that the Nilos would be the sleeker version of it. So I'm trying to take it more into a junkier style, and it sleeks out as it comes to be in the future. Aggressive-wise, it didn't necessarily have to be much more than it's basically on its own to go try and stop the Enterprise. It's its mission to stop it from getting home. And it's got torpedoes, it's got lasers or phaser cannons.
Well, that kind of leads into my next question, actually. That brings us on to one of the things I like about this ship is how heavily armed it is. It's far better armed than the bird of prey we see later on. She has the familiar wingtip disruptors, which can fire both pulses and beams, a forward torpedo launcher, but it also has 2 head-mounted swivel cannons and a larger turret underneath the wings. Talk to us about why it was so heavily armored, which you kind of did, is kind of on its own, and what would be the purpose for each weapon system tactically. We know torpedoes are generally used for direct hull hits after the shields have been lowered, and disruptors are there to take out the shields. So did you think of any ways that this ship, tactics-wise, would attack another vessel?
Yeah, well, it's funny because you think of this stuff when you get the script, and you go, well, it's a single ship. So you try and piece together why there would be one ship. So you think, well, it's got to be enough to take on the challenge of stopping a starship. And so that determines what, from a drawing point of view, what you do. Well, it's a single ship. They're putting all their faith into it. So it's got to have the armament to do what it's got to do. And that's why I put as much on it as I could. It wasn't necessarily to be a big ship. And so you got the windows for scale on it to take it down a little bit. The original Bird of Prey, depending on which version you look at, from the movie is a smaller ship than basically the starships. And that always is determined also by the show. The Starship Enterprise is always kind of the basis of what's bigger and what's smaller. And if the Enterprise is 5,000 feet long, a Klingon ship's going to be 5,000. There's always kind of that match in the size depending on what era and film or TV show you're doing. And so this was definitely going to be a smaller ship. It had to be bulky, like we were talking about. The architecture is a little bit prehistoric compared to modern, but it had to be armored. And that's why you got the plating around the front. You got the double piping instead of the single. And anything I thought would be vulnerable, I tried to double up. And it's got more cabling on it than the other ones. That's why the wing stuff is stronger. So I tried to make it a tougher ship, yet it's still small, and it has to take on quite a mission.
So you didn't see this as being a scout ship like the Star Trek 3 Bird of Prey was. You saw it as being another version of a warship.
Exactly. So again, you're kind of making things up as when you get the script idea. So you're going, well, this is in between the original series Jeffrey ship and the Bird of Prey. So where are you going to go? And you just kind of make things up and hope it works out. And you're always, everyone in the art department is kind of conscious of the old show and the new show. So you're trying very hard to tie these things in and make sure that works. It doesn't always work out that way when the approval process goes. And again, you're drawing for somebody else's vision, and they have all this in their mind, and we're going off just a few words sometimes. So you hope you land right where it needs to be.
But you certainly picked quite an interesting stylistic choice there by having rotating cannons on the actual head of the ship or the bridge module, because then you've got to, again, when you break the mold so much like that, because no other Klingon ships have got that. I think when you get into the Vorchal and Negvar, it's a bit erroneous where the actual weapons are a bit more. But for the classical designs, I mean, that's quite a radical choice to put them on the head. Well, at what point did you say there's a space there, let's just deck that out, or was that a very natural fit for you, do you think?
Yeah, again, that goes back to like looking at old military stuff. And if you look at the battleships in World War II, they have cannons all over the side of the ship. The modern ones, they have like a single cannon and missile launchers all over the ship. And so that's what it's trying to do, take it back in something that's recognizable as a past defense system, which would be cannons, little side-by-side cannons and stuff, as opposed to kind of inset stuff. And so just trying to make the architecture look older. I'm using kind of reference to things you already know, so it will pop in your head, oh, it's got cannons like the old ships have. So that's what I'm trying to like register the thought as.
Well, guys, hope you enjoyed part 1.
Yeah, me too. I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it,
Good, so did I. But there's a part 2 on the way soon.
But you guessed that probably with the title. But yeah, next week, guys, tune in for part 2, the conclusion of this wonderful episode.
See you then.